sounds good.
Hello, audience. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Here we have on the Globally podcast, Miss Julia Kalinski. She is an administrator at the Bolles School, and we are so thankful to have her. And she's going to talk to us about her experiences as an immigrant from Ukraine. Okay,
Thank you.
let's jump right in. So, Mrs. Kalinski, what was life like during a time of Eastern USSR dominance?
Well,
Yes.
okay. So I grew up in Ukraine, in Kiev, Ukraine, and I was born in 1985. So that was right before the Soviet Union broke up in the early 90s. So most of my memories kind of stem from right when everything kind of broke up and we moved into the independent part, but there were still a lot of remnants of the Soviet society and kind of integration of a new currency system. So life was challenging. I think as a child, you didn't notice it as much, but just the things that I remember from my personal perspective were I remember three different types of currency that we used at the grocery store. I remember going to the grocery store with these little coupons that said
Yeah.
exactly what you could get. So, like bread, eggs, whatever, and very specifically. And then you would show up at the grocery store, and sometimes they would even have those things to get.
Wow.
So just like just the trade and all of those agreements, none of that was really solidified at the time yet. So the access that we had was very limited. So I just remember that being a big part of growing up. We always had enough, but it was never, we didn't have other choices. So, if we had like two types of bread, and sometimes they were out of one type of bread. So you
Yeah.
had one type of bread. So just the idea of like a lot of choices was not something I was used to at all
Mm.
growing up. And like the VCR didn't come to us until I was
Wow.
about 8 years old. And
Wow.
I remember Fox and Hound was my first Disney movie, and it was
Mm.
like I don't think it was. I think it was taped in a movie theater. I don't know where we
Wow.
got this like precious film, but it was just an interesting dynamic of just not having access. I think that
Wow.
that's probably the biggest takeaway
So how
from
did
that.
that influence or impact your psychology, especially as a child?
Well, I think you don't know what you don't know. So we didn't really have perspective of others. We kind of had an idea that, the United States, and I had several missionaries that I had met, and they had brought different like Mickey Mouse things because we didn't have
Yeah.
any Disney, like none of that was officially in the country. So we knew something was out there that was awesome, whatever, but we were used to just kind of having a very limited lifestyle where we spent a lot of time outside. Like I remember my childhood being very positive.
Wow. Yes.
And I remember sledding outside with my friends for 6 or 7 hours a day, and we didn't have TV really, so we just didn't do that. And most of I think my parents worked really hard to make sure that we had enough. But you obviously don't have perspective when you don't have access to those. No one
Yeah.
traveled. I didn't know anybody who had traveled outside of the Soviet Union. So there was just a lack of perspective of what else was out there, especially as a young
Yeah.
girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight. What made you immigrate to the United States?
So family circumstances. My mother was a physician,
Mm.
and she was a neurologist, and she worked a lot with victims of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
Oh,
And
yes.
so she then began some exchange programs with the Florida Hospital in Orlando. So she built a lot of relationships with those folks, and she took them to the plant, and they did a lot of research. So when she herself got cancer, they were actually able to fundraise and bring her here for treatment.
Mm.
And then unfortunately she passed away. So that was kind of the main catalyst. And she wanted me to end up in this country and have opportunities and have access to all the
Yeah.
things that obviously we didn't. And my family's circumstances at home were not favorable to raising a
Mm.
child without her.
Yeah.
So that was the reason. And I was actually adopted as a teenager.
Mm. Wow.
So I came here in ninth grade, right into high school.
Wow.
So yeah.
What were some of those what were some you mentioned some, but what were the main struggles you had during the immigration process or this adjusting to life in a new country?
Sure. So that's a good question. And I think the first impression is growing up really quickly
Mm.
because I was the only one who knew English. And so doing the paperwork for that process was all on me. So that was the first kind of very difficult. And I, messed some things up,
Yeah.
which delayed us some, and there were some struggles there. But I think some other struggles were just, when we landed in Miami, I remember coming into this place with all these choices.
Wow.
And I think we went into a Walmart and I was like, why do we need 75 types of nail polish? This is very interesting because we had
Yeah.
two where I'm from, and that was enough, but
Yeah.
apparently there are 75 now. So it was just that the getting used to,
Mm.
just kind of the excess and the different way,
Mm.
style of clothing and mannerisms and culture and all of those things were definitely a challenge, especially after losing, a parent. There's a lot of, a lot of trauma that came with that as a 13-year-old. But so
Yeah.
a combination of both of those things, just entering into a totally new place and trying to adapt, but also deal with,
Mm.
loss and all those things. There was a lot of, but I had a really great village of support.
Mm.
So that was key in really doing well through that.
Yes. That
Yeah.
that is always helpful. It does sometimes take a village to raise
Yeah.
children.
Oh, it
Yeah.
does.
I can testify to that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I noticed that through these different circumstances, through changing countries and a new lifestyle, were you almost forced to mature faster than sometimes it felt that you kind of felt naturally inclined to? And if so, how did that kind of impact you, or how did you reconcile those thoughts?
So yes, there's definitely decisions and things that I had to do and make throughout, the immigration process that most people, here, normal teenagers in America are not facing. But on the other
Mm.
hand, I got incredible opportunity, from where I was and where I started to now. So I think that focusing on the positive was a big part of me being able to adapt and focusing on, you know, moving forward and how do I, how I do want to fit in, but I also want to maintain, my culture and my past. And my adopted parents were very good about just making sure that I still maintain that. And I went home every year for many years, and visited my grandma and visited, my friends back home. So just I think the balance of moving forward, but also remembering where you came from
Yeah.
and maintaining those roots and really making sure that those are valued not only by you but by those around you.
Mm.
And I really had that with my family. And then the school, I went to a private Christian school.
Yeah.
It was similar to Bolles, a little smaller in Orlando, and I had a lot of teachers and mentors and folks around me there that really kind of checked on me and made sure I was doing well and I was, being taken care of and things like that. So
Mm.
I think it was a collective effort.
Yeah. Well, that is great.
Yeah.
So the first shifting gears very slightly, how have
Yeah.
you adapted from a relatively restricted environment to,
Mhm.
as a youth, obviously, to adapting to the egalitarian style of the United States?
I think that's a good question. I mean, I can share, my personal perspective. I was relatively young when I immigrated, so I
Mm.
think that works to my advantage. I
Mm.
think now seeing a lot of folks, especially from Ukraine, that are immigrating now that are my age, they're having a very different experience than I
Yeah.
think I did when I was a teenager. Just because you are more open, you're more able to, change. You don't have a career yet, you don't have a path that you've already chosen that you now have to change.
Mm.
So I was able to I think I was able to adapt really
Yeah.
well. I also picked up the accent um well, so I was kind of, able to
Yeah.
um, to 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 adapt to the language. So I think I was fairly fortunate in my experience, of adapting very well and still maintaining the understanding of how things are there and really having that perspective. I
Mm.
value that very much now because I see things differently. I see the gratitude and things in my life, here that I think are easy to miss when you don't have perspective.
Yes, that's true. I noticed that, especially in a society that we're in, and especially like the small bowl society microcosm. Not people don't necessarily appreciate that certain
Right.
things that we have, and sometimes we take that for granted. And having that perspective is a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question, but have you ever struggled or did you struggle coming to the United States with the pressures of cultural assimilation?
Um, I I guess I did. I mean, I think I did in the sense of, walking into a ninth grade classroom in
Yeah.
a high school in Orlando, Florida. It's definitely a shock in a lot of ways. And my first year was a big struggle. It was, the just totally different, and the dealing with loss and things like that. So the friend group was small. I don't think people understood how to. And you're ninth grade,
Yeah.
it's hard. You're dealing with your own stuff,
Yeah,
right? And
true.
there's a girl who is like dealing with things that you don't understand. So it's
Yes.
not necessarily anyone's fault, but yeah, I think it's important to surround yourself with a really good support system. I had a great coach when and I ran cross country, and I
Yeah.
actually made it to state at that first year. I think I was really liked to run, and and came to Orlando, to Jacksonville for the first
Yeah.
time, and then ended up here. So it's just a funny coincidence,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think just continuing to move forward and be open and sharing, your experience with people, because I don't think people, I don't know. I didn't experience anything that was very targeted towards me. I experienced just people not understanding and not getting, where I'm coming from. So having that open communication with people, and
Yeah.
telling them and speaking up and being assertive, if they say something that's inappropriate or that
Yeah.
offends you, like just being very open to that,
Mm.
helped me a lot as a teenager. And then after a couple of years, I think I adapted fairly well. I understood the culture here, and I was able to go back and forth. It's funny, I would go home, and the things
Yeah.
I would be there to wear are very different than things I would wear to school and high school here in Orlando. So there was still kind of that dichotomy of,
Yeah.
I'm maintaining my, myself, but I'm also adapting to a new place that's
Mm.
my home now. So
Was there ever a struggle with, especially with that duality of
mhm,
two different cultures?
yeah.
Did you ever struggle with reconciling like your true identity? And how, if so, how did you go about it?
Um, I think maintaining my traditions
Mm.
and my cultural, like, we were very big on holidays
Yes.
and, gatherings, and very family oriented. And when I came
Yes.
here, this is a very individualistic culture versus a
Mm.
collectivist culture
Yes.
in Ukraine. So that was a big change. And my parents really made it a point to allow me to make my big meals and do my things that, and really took part in that. So really grounding myself in my past and being
Yeah.
able to still maintain that. And I do that to this day. My children love beet soup,
Yeah.
and they're like 6 years old. So I take pride in that, because
Yeah.
that was developed through, the
Yeah.
traditions and things that are important to me. And so maintaining that connection still, I think is the best way, was the best way for me to move forward, is, and adapt. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. For
Yeah.
For children who are immigrants or temporary residents, how do you suggest dealing with the problem of them with ethnic and racial acceptance? So, for example, just very similar to what we just talked about. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think everyone has a different experience when it comes to, immigrating here. And I don't pretend to be an expert in, an overall experience for immigrants. I think
Yeah.
it just depends on where you're coming from, what you're coming into, how, all of those things are different. But focusing on positives and gratitude in that perspective, and what, this country has to offer and what you can achieve, I think is is the best way to get rid of the noise. You're never going to have be surrounded by people who agree, who like you, who,
Mm.
think highly of you. That's just not the way it is. So just
Yeah.
being able to have that perspective that I know where I'm going and I know how I'm going to get there and I'm going to do what I need to do and surround myself by the people that are going to help me move forward. So that was my kind of saving, grace when I
Mm.
came here, is just having that community, and being able to be grounded in my
Yeah.
future, and not and being able to just step away from those who are not serving that, or do not agree, or don't
Mm.
like me for some reason, or
Yeah.
whatever. 'Cause you're just not gonna, that's always going to be there. And I think it's more so here, that this country is amazing in that you can have whatever opinion you want and you can
Yeah.
express it. And honestly, when I walk down the street and I see people with hats and shirts that I don't agree with, I smile and I think it's great
Yeah.
because
So
other
much
places,
freedom of expression. Yeah.
right, that I know I don't agree with you, but we're able to do this here.
Yeah.
And in certain other places, there are very severe consequences to that. So
Yeah.
just maintaining that positive outlook, and continuing to move forward. I think that's yeah, that's the answer.
And I would solely agree with you, heavily agree that gratitude for the positive, especially of America, is very important, especially in the society, this progressive society that, there's a lot of still division, but we
There's a
have,
lot of things we don't agree
yeah,
with, and they will always be there. But how do we move forward? How do we
yeah,
work together? How do we, you know,
exactly.
how do we connect and achieve that common goal?
Yeah.
And everybody wants the common goal of living and a free
Yes.
life, and having choices and all of that. Everyone deserves that. So how do we do that together?
Yes.
So yeah.
That's awesome. This is the almost the essence of what I believe our democracy or just an egalitarian society should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, what is a good way for some immigrant teenagers,
Mhm.
especially, to reconcile with the trouble of like not feeling accepted for who you are?
Mhm.
People are excluding you, especially
Mhm.
based on race or
Mhm.
specific ethnic qualities.
Well, again, I can speak to myself and
Yeah.
what I experienced, and I think the best way is to, I don't know, to surround, like, again, to surround yourself with the right people, the right community,
Yeah.
and to educate as much as you can. It's not our job to educate everybody. No, it's not. But it's also, the perspective piece of it that people don't have.
Yeah.
Um, and we have to work together. So there is a piece of, okay, well, I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from and why I feel this way, and hope that you will accept me. And if you don't, then I will move on, and that's fine. So it's hard as a teenager. It's really difficult because there's so many different things
Mm.
that everyone's going through, and you're growing so much and you're learning so much. And so it's hard to have that maturity level and that perspective.
Yeah.
But I think if we just keep an open communication and keep the conversation, and allow safe spaces for
Yeah.
kids to have these conversations face to face,
Yeah.
not necessarily through a screen or through texting, because a lot gets lost in that.
Yeah.
So I think Bolles is doing a great job with the global learning program. I think you guys have so many clubs, so just engaging in those spaces and
Yeah.
making sure that you're telling your story and you're sharing, and you're making all of us better for it.
Yes. I agree. Yes. So
Mhm.
this is kind of piggybacking off of what we just discussed. Were there times either in Ukraine or even still in the United States where you feel like you're an outsider?
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
how did you either reconcile this or kind of just absorb these kind of feelings or deal with the feelings of out being like an outsider?
Yeah. I mean, I think imposter syndrome is common no matter who
Yeah.
you are. It's just part of human nature. I think
Mm.
that, as somebody who um, is from a different country, from that perspective, I think sometimes I I don't understand like certain things, like, we like the excess,
Yeah.
like I see us like having all these choices and all this stuff, and I come from a place that didn't have that. So sometimes I see myself as like, okay, like I don't think anybody understands what I'm thinking right now, because I'm
Yeah.
just coming from a totally different place.
Yeah.
So in that sense, sometimes, yeah, I have those moments and I'm like, okay, I can understand where you're coming from, because I've been in this country for many years now. I get it. But I have the roots of not having. So it just, I think, just just realizing that, in this life where we continue to move forward and we have these experiences, and it makes us richer and it makes us have the ability to share that with others. And I have an opportunity to do that. So it, everybody has moments of that, of
Yeah.
feeling like an outsider, but I think just coming back to the fact that we're a global community, and there's everybody feels that way, even the ones that are
Yeah.
inside, are feeling like outsiders. So we all
Yeah.
struggle with that. But I think that's, some things like silly things like, cereal and pizza, like, were completely new concepts when I first
Yeah.
came here. So just like how that, that's such a big part of America, is that,
Yeah.
everybody has cereal for breakfast. Like when I came here, I'm like, cereal, what is, like, we had a totally different way. And so just, yeah, I have those moments, but I
Yeah.
don't think they're anything, that I can't overcome and move forward.
Yes. Oh, that I agree. Yeah. So final question for
Yeah.
today is, how should, this is from a different perspective. We've been talking from, yeah, like the immigrant's perspective, but how should others who are receiving these people in, especially in like America for context, or how should others receive and embrace minorities, like minority teens, to
Mhm.
ensure that the feeling of being welcome?
I think allowing them to have a voice, as much as whatever space they're in, just giving everyone an opportunity to
Yeah.
have, a space where they feel safe, and where they feel like they can, embrace where they're from, their culture, and
Mm.
feel seen. An example would be, I have a kindergartner at the Ponte Vedra campus, and we had the international festival
Yeah.
there, and that meant a lot, because I had the opportunity to not only educate my child who's never lived in Ukraine, but also share, my culture with the commute with my community, my new
Mm.
community, and
Yeah.
that was very, very accepted and embraced. So just allowing those opportunities to acknowledge,
Mm.
the differences, and celebrate those differences, and make folks feel seen that maybe wouldn't otherwise, and wouldn't share that, and really lead with your differences, because those are the ones that are going to make us a stronger community.
Yeah.
So just changing that narrative of, well, we all need to be the same, we all need to do this and wear this, and it becoming, well, like, what makes you unique, like, let's talk about
Mm.
that, like, oh, how
Yeah.
cool is that you're from here, or that like to celebrate this or that, and just changing that narrative, that our differences are what makes us better. And I think that can start as young as lower school, and
Yeah.
then once that becomes normal in lower school, by the time you're a teenager, it's very much just a part of our community. And
Yeah.
so I think just creating those spaces where others can express themselves, and have that freedom.
Yes, I agree. Especially starting the like acceptance of differences and teaching these at global intercultural relations at such a young age. It allows us to basically not see people's, we see people's differences, but not judge them for it. It's
Right.
another one of those beautiful,
Yeah.
harmonious differences, and just the celebration, which
And
makes
you
it,
can celebrate. Yeah.
yeah. Well, this concludes our time, Miss Kalinski, and I'm so grateful once again to have to this time to interview you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate.
Yes, thank you so much. It was awesome.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad, and let me know when it's out so I can, or yeah,
Yes, I will. I'll send you it right over.
awesome. All right.
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Okay. Take
Well,
care.
usual. Hey guys, so that concludes our interview with Mrs. Kalinski, and I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned and gained lots of insight on someone's perspective as an immigrant and how we as receivers, recipients of immigrant people, or you who those who are watching that are teen immigrants or that are struggling with the ideas of acceptance or how do I feel accepted and how can people accept me or how can I accept others who are different from me. I hope you gained insight and gained a wonderful understanding. Always make sure to love everyone and we'll see you in the next video.